An amazing group of panelists. We'll spend some time answering some questions, but before we get into it, I'll ask everyone to introduce themselves. So maybe John, starting with you, and then we can work our way back.
All right, thank you. John Russell. I am the Chief Technology Officer for Dominion Energy, and really thrilled to be here.
Mary Kipp, thank you so much for having us. I'm the CEO of Puget Sound Energy. We are the largest utility in the Pacific Northwest, serving about 1.3 million electric customers and about 900,000 gas customers. So we're a dual utility.
So Matthieu Courtecuisse, I'm the founder and the CEO of SIA, a group of 3,000 consultants across the world in 19 countries, with a very focus on AI transformation at the intersection of multiple industries, starting with utilities. I'm not here for the World Cup, because France is going to win for sure. But I'm glad to be here with you guys.
Steve Hochman, Managing Director for the Americas for Nagarro, which is a technology services firm. We have about 1,000 or so data and AI engineers doing nothing but working on this topic, but through the lens of deployment.
Maria Pope, President and CEO of Portland General Electric. We are also in the Pacific Northwest. We serve just under 1 million customers in Oregon, and we have just announced recently an acquisition into Washington State.
And then just a bit about myself, Sam Barnett. I help to lead go-to-market at Cohere. One of the areas of responsibility is to lead our energy and utilities practice. Just a little bit about Cohere. We are one of roughly 10 foundational large language model labs in the world. So we build large language models. Our CEO, one of our co-founders, is actually a co-author of the research paper that invented the transformer. So that's the T in GPT. A number of other individuals on the data science side are leading our practice there. And we're really thrilled to be speaking here today with such an esteemed panel. Topics that we're going to be covering include grid complexity, cybersecurity risk, and trust in AI, unlocking value from data, forecasting, partnerships, and scaling beyond pilots. So look forward to covering a lot, and I am more than confident, based on some of the early conversation we had in the green room, that this is going to be an interesting panel for the group. So maybe what I can do is I can actually start with Maria. As the electric grid has become more complex and increasingly so, increasing demand, tighter reliability expectations, dynamic risks. How is AI helping you operate the system more intelligently, coordinating reliability, safety, speed and response for things that weren't possible before?
Sure, thank you. So first of all, we are one of the fastest growing utilities in the country, and a lot of that has to do with our high-tech customers. Initially, a lot of that was centered around the semiconductor industry, and for the last 5 to 10 years, it's really been around data centers and AI. Oregon is the recipient of the underwater sea cables from the Pacific, not too dissimilarly to Virginia on those underwater sea cables from the Atlantic. And so when we think about our system, we have been pushing it to its limits for quite some time. And when we've been focused on AI for a number of years and really around data and how we use data. We started with how we optimize our generation fleet and how we monitor remotely, and in many ways, early machine learning around the optimization of that equipment and that generation. Most recently, what you see us doing is really focusing in on the grid optimization. I like to say that we should be as nice to our people as we are to our assets, but we have about $14 billion of assets that we optimize using AI. And what we have found is tremendous latent capacity when we go down to the 5-minute mark in terms of the number of hours we can increase, sometimes upwards of 20%. But we marry this software technology with not only hardware investments in transformers and new lines, but also we have coated many of our lines with a clay reflective coating material that also enables much higher capacity on those lines. And then finally, we have deployed dynamic line ratings. We've used the Heimball system. And so we're measuring temperature, wind speed, humidity to again be able to maximize that opportunity. And between those, you take the 20% from the analytics, upwards of 20% from the line coatings, and you take then the smart systems that we're able to deploy with the Heimball dynamic line ratings, and we're getting tremendous additional capacity. And since we've also joined the energy and balance market, we're able to use that capacity into that real-time market. And then in October, when we go to the day-ahead market, we will be able to use that to further lower energy costs for all of our customers. So there's no question that as we look at the grid today, there is capacity that can be unlocked with intelligence, with grid technologies, and then when using the existing markets and infrastructure systems that we've had for a while.
Incredible. Maybe I'll jump over to Matthieu, just to follow up on that. Similarly, with the rising demand and the aging infrastructure, climate volatility, geopolitical pressure, all of this happening at once. What's your perspective on how AI is helping utilities to manage this growing system complexity, and then of course maintain the reliability and resilience?
Yes, thank you for this question. So, and I don't want to be too much redundant to what Maria said, but so first of all, we are serving more than 80 utilities in the world, and AI is not new to energy companies, right? So before we were calling that like data science and data, but for sure, predictive AI in particular has been very instrumental to uplift the operations across multiple utilities. And fairly, as we work across multiple industries, utilities, when it comes to predictive AI, it's pretty strong in terms of how we really deploy at scale predictive AI. Having that said, what we see is this world is becoming more and more unpredictable. That's the issue for most of the utilities, and AI can help to predict the unpredictable. So it can work through machine learning technologies that have been largely deployed already and in place. But at the same time, we see many transformations, heavy electrification in progress because of data centers, but not only. We have also the issue which is related to the black swan events. It can be storms, it can be flood, it can be even COVID, right? So, and now we are living in a world where we see potentially one black swan event every 6 months, every year, right? So that's where also AI can help when it's potentially deployed at scale within the grid's operation in particular. So then there are new opportunities related to the flexibility we need, because the demand is also changing by nature, and we need more flexibility. We need also to trace more decarbonization in the mix. So that's new constraints where all of that AI can really help and go to the next level.
Fantastic, thank you. Doing another jump over to John.
Okay.
Maybe shifting topics just a little bit. As you're digitizing more of the grid, and you're thinking about introducing AI into the operational environment, what's your perspective on how this changes your posture in cybersecurity?
I actually think it's a pretty dramatic change. I would say for the most part, in the OT environment, we've historically created a moat and nothing touched it. It's all air gap. But to leverage the technology, we have to change that paradigm and really look at and understand that the power of AI comes with a little bit of duality. So you may have a positive on this side, but it could be used for bad on this side, right? And so I think we have to look at it from that standpoint and really kind of rally around projects like Project Glasswall, where we're looking at the fact that things like LLMs can actually identify these vulnerabilities faster. That then changes, speed becomes a real critical protection leverage, meaning if I know that there's a vulnerability and the bad guy knows that there's a vulnerability as quickly as I do, I have to react faster, right? And so the point of being able to have the benefit of getting a patch, testing the patch, and then deploying the patch is gonna be no more, right? You're gonna have to actually lean forward and then validate afterwards, right? It's basically patch then test, patch then assess, because the ability to kind of respond, the speed is really critical. The other part is, the other vulnerability is now data lineage is, with AI, is gonna be another kind of attack surface. The fact that whether it's outside or inside, right? Because you can inject from the inside from your AI systems or also have vulnerabilities from the outside. So you need to know where the data actually comes from. And so I think, and the last thing is actually turning that duality in for good, meaning using AI to defend against cyber, right? So I think those three things all together, the fact that we have to move faster because the threats will be more timely, the fact that we have to understand that anytime we see some benefit, we have to understand what the offset of that is, particularly from an OT side. But we can't live in a moat because of the fact that you need that benefit on the OT side to actually get to the optimization of the grid, et cetera. And then lastly, being able to be more comfortable using the AI in a cyber stance.
The points that you made, particularly about the air-gapped environments and the data lineage, I hear that often in concerns around cybersecurity and protecting your data and understanding where it's all coming from. Related to that, maybe I'll go over to Mary now. With regards to your organization and how you've emphasized that AI is being used to enhance human judgment, replace but enhance, how are you measuring and building trust among your people, your customers and the systems to ensure that they're truly augmenting the work and not just creating new points of failure?
Yeah, it's such an important question. And I mean, because AI holds tremendous, tremendous potential, as we all know. But as we were talking about before the panel, it's also really scary to people, right? And, you know, I have kids in their 20s and everyone's talking about, are there going to be jobs? You know, are we going to be firing people? Is the whole purpose of this? You know, we want to streamline our workforces. And I actually kind of use the work from home as an analogy. So when COVID hit, we actually had it, we had it hit first in our service territory. So we were kind of the model for the rest of the country, unfortunately. But we told people, yeah, go work from home. Some people over time interpreted this as, we're never going to have to come back. So the reason I say this is analogous to AI is I don't want to tell my employees this isn't going to get rid of some jobs, right? Because it probably is. It's probably going to create others as well, and none of us know exactly what those are going to be yet. So we're trying to approach it through basically training, engagement, and leadership. And so the training is, let's make sure everyone has basic AI literacy, right? It's an important part of being human now. You like it, great. If you don't like it, great, but it's important. And then the second part is making sure that people comply with our policies, right? We all know, like, you can't be using external AI sources with internal corporate data, things like that, but sometimes people don't think about that. So we have an AI council actually comprised of some executives. One of them is sitting right here looking at me, and they decide what the appropriate uses are for AI within our company and also where we prioritize it, because we can't do everything at once. In terms of training, we have, you know, executive training, we have leader training, we have individual performer training. We get feedback from people, lots of listening sessions. But what we want to make sure is that people are using it to make work easier, make work more efficient for them, hopefully get rid of some really boring tasks that no one likes doing, but also that we're not creating complications or roadblocks so that people feel like they're actually working around AI, because failed adoption, I think, is probably the worst case scenario. So we don't want any of that to happen. We do a great place to work survey. We make sure people are, you know, feeling good about it, and we kind of go from there. But like I said, we can't make promises, right? We can't tell people we know exactly what the future looks like. But one of the things I loved talking about before we came up here is I think all of us agree, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but we think there's going to be incredible new job opportunities for people. We just don't know exactly what those are going to look like. But I, for one, am looking forward to getting rid of the boring work. Very, very exciting.
Fascinating. And to your point about avoiding the failed adoption, as much as you bring the technology in, if people aren't using it, that kind of puts a limit on how impactful it can be. And so maybe, Steve, jumping over to you, you work with organizations all across the Americas. Very curious to hear your perspective about what needs to be in place across data, digital infrastructure, enterprise context for utilities to unlock the value from their assets, and then also convert them into trusted operational decisions and ultimately outcomes.
Yes, great question. And at the same time, I loved Mary's response as part of the answer. Even though we're talking about technology and I come from a technology firm, it's still about the people, just to be clear. So unlocking value, there's certainly, there's a technology component that I want to talk about. At the same time, the observation across hundreds of clients that are all working to try to figure out that same answer is that it's more about leadership behaviors, frankly, than it is about just straight technology. There's a basic framework that we have that addresses this, that both allows companies to, on the one hand, think big, and that's the starting point, is really having a conversation, a strategic conversation with your teams around the future and the art of the possible, but managing the tension between that and the need to de-risk and start small and experiment. And then last but not least, the third part of this framework is scale fast. Scale fast, I'll actually start there, is about the people. It's actually about people and adoption, not about whether you had the best widget or the best agent. But let's talk about the art of the possible piece, the think big component, because I think that that's often overlooked. When things are moving fast, as they are, whether we're talking about in the infrastructure side or the technology, it becomes that much more paramount for leaders to make room. This is what we see. Make room for conversations that look a lot like the types of conversations we have around building a new trading platform. What would it look like to, in our case, build for a major sustainable energy firm to actually automate what is otherwise a spreadsheet-based process? What's possible? And in our case, we saw that when you answered that question, you could unlock for that particular client 5 to 7% revenue growth top line. But you started with the big picture question: is what is possible? Similarly, in the T&D space, there was an infrastructure organization in the T&D arena that had a very slow manual maintenance process. But the big picture question that they asked in this case, which was distinct, was what could we do if we applied technology to an otherwise very manual job for people who are not technical? And the answer, full stop, was 30% reduction, even in phase one, once they asked that big picture question and made room for it. 30% reduction in the time between defect discovery and defect resolution, and so on. So each one of those required, though, particularly for people like the folks that are in this room, a big picture conversation that typically doesn't happen. It's not about applying a widget, it's about a strategic conversation around what is possible. The start small piece, part two, is actually in tension with the first. So we're talking, everybody knows that it's a good idea to pilot, right? But where, when, how? So the other observation is companies that do this really well are exceptional at defining a business case, as mundane as that seems, to be able to say, what problem are we solving? Not where do we apply the new shiny object. So that's part two. And then scale fast. It's definitely about training, upskilling. It's also about architecture and having a platform that doesn't just work at a pilot level, but that the minute that pilot is successful can transfer to the larger organization. And Dominion in the technology world, this is what you're living and breathing. I will say the reason that I underline this point is pilots themselves can be problematic. The idea that you could launch a pilot and then suddenly get value, no, there's actually this other step, which is architecture, governance, and at the end of the day, people and adoption.
It's great. Executives on the panel here, and I'm sure in the audience as well, love numbers and quantified impact. So the business case definitely resonates. And I think maybe over to you, Matthieu, related to this, we're starting to wade into the conversation now about practical application. AI, in theory, has a lot of aspirational impact, but from your experience, where are utilities turning to actually go from experimentation into tangible impact that is, financial value and has a measurable impact?
Yeah, so maybe we can go through 4 concrete examples, right? So we are supporting one utility company out of Scotland, right? So, and we have had them to deploy an AI stack within their central command to deal with storms. If you go to Scotland, I mean, like there are storms during the winter, like every 5 days now. So, and the good thing with AI, we have the full prediction stack to anticipate that. So it's had to connect prediction and resilience, right? So, and I think you have been experiencing some storms recently. So I think it's something which is coming more and more, and really AI can be very instrumental in that space. Another experiment we have been deploying at scale is right now to have a next generation demand response for another grid operator, 35 millions of meters deployed, where we have like a next generation demand response system. And the output of it is 1.5% of non-injected electricity in the system. Okay, and for this company, it represents the equivalent of San Francisco, right? So it can be huge, and it's only thanks to AI. Where the utilities firms are a bit late, if I compare to other industries, it can be in agentic AI, because we can fairly say that utilities firms are a bit more conservative when it comes to ways of working, if I may say so. And, but typically, we have developed and deployed some agents in how to manage storms, flood, to build personas within the organization, and to orchestrate how to respond to this type of black swan events, and to have like something which is already prepared in terms of simulation, crisis management. And agents are here to assist people, not to replace people. And the last one is on the R&D front, because the panel is about innovation. And we have multiple problems in, let's say, in the energy industry. One is energy storage, as a good example, or it can be nuclear fusion that have been like the dream since I've been an engineer, like a long time ago. We have been working on that. And AI recently has been helping to crack around energy storage for batteries in the cars, and all the new generation of Tesla around the battery management has been totally designed through the support of AI. So we can really accelerate the pace of R&D across multiple industries, but typically in energy, it's highly needed.
It's a great point about capacity management, and maybe Maria, I'll turn back to you on that. So as organizations are investing in the new infrastructure, how are you partnering with technology companies to develop AI tools that help to unlock some of that hidden capacity and deliver more reliable energy to your customers?
Sure. So we have a combination of using AI that we already own embedded within systems that we have procured and use every day, making sure that we're getting the maximum out of those, that we develop ourselves in-house, and that we partner with. Let me talk a little bit about some of the use cases, because I think that was a really important piece. We now have, and who would have thought, in the very rainy Pacific Northwest, about 5% of our energy supply comes from solar. And a lot of that is rooftop solar. And it started coming in, and you can end up with large queues, and people will get upset, and then they'll complain. And we were able to bring all of the aspects of our company together that were hitting that issue. And at first, we offshored that work for speed to hook up. And then we took that work back, and we added agents to it. And today, it takes less than 24 hours to get an approval on your rooftop solar, unless there's an issue, and then we can debottleneck that generally within about 1 week. So we have completely changed that experience for the customers. We took that same work that we did, and none of this is overly complicated, and we took our existing standards, which we had been refining and reducing the number of types of ways we repair and build our distribution system. And so we have a pretty good, robust data lake of that work. And so we have two agents. We have Bill and we have Bob. Bob can build a design and someone else can check it, or Bill can just check someone else's design. And so we have significantly reduced our headcount, but most importantly, what used to take about a month, you'd have temp power, you'd construct your building or finish your home construction, and then you'd get permanent power. We don't have to do nearly as much temp power, and the speed to hook up means that whether it is the construction part of the economy or the ownership part of the economy, we've completely changed that customer experience. And the types of jobs that people are able to move on to are much more meaningful than they had before. One of the things I think is we also look at sort of necessities. We're a very renewables-focused clean energy area. So we knew that we needed to be very tech forward. We're also the 4th or 5th largest electric vehicle market in the country. So we started working about 6, 7 years ago with WeaveGrid. We also work with Grid Care, we work with Emerald AI, and a bunch of others that do very similar things about controlling the end use of our product. And so through WeaveGrid, which started as 2 people and now has over 60, they are able to control when we charge electric vehicles across our system, and we give them an incentive to make sure that they're hooked into that. Now they're scaling that to homes and to others so that we have a truly integrated distribution management system, which is very beneficial since hydro generally flows in the evening, that accommodates fish patterns and stream flows. Wind frequently will blow at night, sun obviously during the day. And so we're able to use the distribution system in a way that maximizes the lowest cost energy. And that was started out as a renewable energy problem and has really become a sort of a power to customer delivery advantage that we have today.
Those are fascinating insights. I don't think anyone would have anticipated a correlation with fish patterns. Then I also
wouldn't, and no one would have thought we would be integrating hundreds of megawatts of battery storage connected to data centers that can flex up and down when we created this, but better lucky than good.
Yeah, I'd say so. And I also love that you've named your agents Bob and Bill.
Yes. We also offered beer as prizes as our folks began to optimize the agents.
Amazing. Mary, maybe over to you related to this. Again, focusing more on practical use cases, because I think everyone here would appreciate that more so than the theory. Where are you seeing the most immediate impact from an operational level, particularly as it relates to improving real-time decision-making?
So one of the things I love about this industry, by the way, is I get to listen to people like Maria and learn from them. And Maria is one of my favorite people to learn from, I have to say. But I will try not to duplicate anything she said, although I can tell you already, we do not connect rooftop solar nearly as fast as you, so I got to figure out how to do that one. So we try to kind of look at our AI use cases in 3 buckets. It's kind of 40-40-20 is how I would divide it. About 40% is core operations, some of which, like Maria talked about. About 40% is customer and transformation. And then about 20% is, the basic corporate stuff and data lake establishment, things like that. So in the operations use cases, there's some really fun things that we've done. A couple of times people have mentioned storm response. So we've gotten much better at storm response because we can predict weather patterns better. We can predict exactly where outages are going to be, and we can deploy crews and create better responses as well. So that's one. The second one is we had a heck of a time with load forecasting for a while. I don't know why, but we did. We're always learning. And it has greatly, greatly improved our ability to forecast load. So that's really been terrific, and that adds a lot of value for our customers and saves them money. And then I think another thing that has been really huge for us is just like on predictive maintenance. So you're talking about our love of air gapping, and boy, do we love to air gap where we can, and we're all trying to stop doing that, and I think we have at PSC. But to be able to engage in predictive maintenance, thereby taking better care of our generation, saving our customers money, it's incredibly imperative that we use AI. So then if we kind of go to safety, security, those types of things, something as simple as telematics on our vehicles prevents a lot of accidents. It also helps us understand when we have people who maybe like me may not be the best drivers out there on the road and help them learn and improve. So we have that. It also helps us greatly on determining with the situation with Mythos and other things like how do we prioritize which patches we're doing first from a cybersecurity perspective, because it's otherwise really, really overwhelming. I would say wildfire, which is near and dear to Maria and my hearts, that is huge. So I'll give you an example. I always like examples. Last summer, we use AI cameras, which are incredible. They're AI enabled. They do all kinds of amazing things. But we were able to spot very, very early, like almost upon ignition, a non-utility caused fire near our lines, and that we were able to get first responders out very quickly, and we were able to limit the burn to 53 acres. Now, 53 acres might sound like a lot to you, but when you consider over 2 million acres have burned in this country already this year, that's a pretty good outcome. So that's one, and then we have a thing that we call energy orchestration Every utility has a version of it, but it's basically how we find those customers who want to interact with us more, really help us. It helps a lot with peak shaving. It helps us with all kinds of things. But through the use of AI, electric vehicles are also very big for us. It helps us identify who has electric vehicles, who's likely to get electric vehicles, and then how we can help people with charging. And so, that's been an exciting use case as well. And I mean, you can go on and on because there are so many, but once again, it's important to prioritize them, because if we try to boil the ocean, we're gonna not have appropriate adaptation or adoption, and it will fail. So we gotta be orderly but fast. And by utility speed, that's really, really fast.
I want to add something to what Mary was saying, because on this wildfire piece, that is a huge issue for both of our companies. But it is as a societal-wide problem. And the cameras that Mary's talking about are able to be accessed by first responders, by U.S. Forest Service, by Department of Ecology in Washington, by Department of Environment in Oregon, by our state forestry entities. And so as a result, it enables everyone to be a solution provider rather than this just residing on the backs of the utilities. And so changing the landscape of the question and the problem was enabled by technology and AI.
Yeah, I'll echo what you said there. The wildfire example, I think, is an interesting one. The experience that we have working with a number of utilities, vegetation management is another example, and closely related, using the models that can see, analyze, and then direct action downstream. That seems to be something that is increasingly popular and important application of the technology. And then related back to what you were saying about improving the flow of forecasting, maybe I'll turn back to Steve now. So as we're seeing a growing use of AI in forecasting, from demand and asset behavior, power prices, outage risk, operational constraints, what's your perspective on how models are moving beyond just prediction to actually helping utilities make better real-time decisions and be proactive day to day?
Yeah, embedded in the question is almost the answer too, right, of how you make this successful, this realm of forecasting. And the notion that it is connected to a decision is point one. So often what we see, and we've done dozens of these forecasting implementations, is forecasting not because people aren't smart, but just they don't have, to Mary's point, the big picture view of the full landscape, right? And so they're maybe operating in a silo to say, I need to improve my forecast and declaring victory. But the so what, and we also work with another Northwest utility that's not on this panel. This is a Northwest bias for whatever reason. That was trying to solve the problem of forecasting, and there was a redefinition around the decisions that had to be made around generation and pricing. That difference and that change in scope was crucial, and I'd say that's just a continuing theme for us, is that answering the problem to be solved, but then also assuring that the right stakeholders are involved to be able to not just develop the forecast, but consume it and act on it is crucial. We were having a side conversation prior to this panel about how forecasts are always wrong, and that's also true. So it's a little bit of humility. Despite the power of AI, and we see this to substantial multi-digit percentage increases in forecast accuracy, to know that whether you're doing long-range forecasting around solar power, everybody's seen that graph, where the forecast kept being wrong year after year. It was asymptotic growth, and we kept being too conservative. Or we're talking about next day or even real time. It's just inherently a difficult exercise with a lot of variables that aren't in our control. So it's a margin game, and if we can understand that continuous improvement is in fact what's going to get us value, then we're going to win.
That's great, and the point that you made about having the big picture view, this comes up often in a lot of conversations about context that these models have to reason against, and I think that what you were highlighting there really resonates with what I've heard in the market as well. And maybe to just go back to John, with regards to working with partners, and again, on this theme of scaling and moving quickly at the speed of utilities, can you share a little bit about what you think distinguishes truly great partners that help utilities operate at scale versus those that perhaps struggle to move past pilots?
Yeah, I would tell you that Historically, I think this new age of energy being the critical path of AI is helping us, but historically, companies didn't innovate with regulated industries in mind, right? It was a bolt-on, it was a remediate, which created a latency in our ability to kind of innovate. I think now, with energy being at the forefront, we can take the opportunity to engage up front and get our partners and even our startups to start thinking about this market as a key market and starting to build with that purpose intent of this has to operate on the grid, it has to have the right controls, it has to have the right observability of those controls so that we can actually use it without having to bring it through this long process of refining it and hardening it and all of those other things. I think that the other side of it is really starting us as utilities kind of breaking out of the mold and doing a bit more active tech scouting, which is finding the industries, finding the startups early and influencing them with respect to what it takes to actually get into this market. So I think those two things will help us co-innovate better, one, and reduce the latency that we have with when we can use those things. Because right now, the latency is an issue because we need the technology to drive the efficiency, the additional generation, transmission, and distribution of the technology. The latency is another issue for us because we can't use the technology as soon as it's available. And so if we attack that up front, that closes that gap and gets us closer to being able to meet the demands of the future as we go forward.
Amazing. The innovation, like you were just highlighting, now being at the forefront of the energy industry, I think that is only going to continue, especially as we have to figure out to meet the demand. And so then, Mary, back to you. If we're seeing hyperscalers playing a big part in this as well. From your perspective, how important is co-innovation with the hyperscalers and also with new technologies that hyperscalers are bringing to market, ultimately to benefit customers and to make them commercially available at scale?
I don't think you can overstate the importance of co-innovation. We've got to work together. We invested very early, a very small investment, about $10 million in SMRs in Washington State at a place called Richland. We quickly discovered, wow, this is not commercial for us yet. This is going to be too expensive for our customers. So we were delaying it at a time at which we'll take power. What was wonderful is a hyperscaler stepped in, and they are trying to develop the project. Even utilities as big as the potential NextEra Dominion combo, their balance sheets aren't even going to compare to the hyperscalers. So we need these balance sheets. We need this ability to spend money on R&D, which we traditionally do not do. We cannot do because we have to be so careful with our customers' dollars. We need them to be able to do those things. So if we're going to get there on SMRs, advanced geothermal, fusion, it's going to be the hyperscalers, I think, not the utilities. So very excited for them. I really appreciate their pledges, by the way. I'm not trying to raise rates, but I will say one note of caution. Because they have bigger balance sheets, sometimes we find ourselves bidding against them on projects, and we are always going to lose because they have more dollars. We have to really watch our customers' costs. And so we've seen this shift in the demand curve, and I don't know the answer, but we've got to figure this one out because that does, just by its nature, basic economics 101, you shift the demand curve upward, the supply does not adjust enough, you're going to have higher prices. Not their fault, though. It's just a reality.
All right, well, I know we're coming up on time here. Maybe opening it up if there's any questions from the audience that we can have our panelists answer. Oh, no? Okay, then I think with that, we're wrapping it up. So thank you, everyone, for today. Again, the panelists, thank you so much for such thoughtful responses, and hope you enjoy the conference.
I almost wore the suit.